Patch EU5 1.3 is already coming to beta next week. This patch will bring yet again a lot of rebalance, a lot of new UI and game improvements, a few new features, and most importantly, plenty of free content for, you guessed it right, Italy. Today Johan is walking us through all of these changes planned for the patch in details. Let's see them. I'll actually start from the end of the dev diary because for me that's the most interesting part. Content and flavor introduced in this patch. The two major situations for Italy, so the Guelphs and Ghibellines that you start with, and then the Italian wars that are happening, I think, in Renaissance, are receiving dedicated overhauls with new actions, new options, a lot of rebalance, and improving the UI of the situations. You know, guys, I've been always telling you that in my opinion, situations are having the biggest potential in this game versus the previous iterations of Europa Universalis, and I'm hoping they're gonna keep bringing the most out of these features. So first of all, there will be over 100 new events covering the Renaissance culture and dynamics, especially for the nations that did not have any content before, so you know, Verona, Montefaro, Siena, Pisa and Lucca. On top of that, there will be also a rework of the starting development and the events of the Scaligeri Wars. I think that's the war against Verona at the start of the game. And some Italian localizations improvements, but more importantly, on top of 300 new Balkan advances added in the previous patch, we're gonna receive 180 new advances specifically for Italy, with 40 advances being also reworked. Speaking of the previous patch, on the 1.3 they're also adding something that was missed on that 1.2, so a disaster for Bulgaria called Twilight of the Sardom. Remember in the 1.2 DLC, The Fate of the Phoenix, they added a new mechanic called bureaucracies, and it's only Byzantium that received that initially, but in patch 1.3 they are adding 3 bureaucracies. First of all, for the Europeans, I see early modern state set covering commissariats, admiralties and colonial offices for the mid-late gameplay, while for the early game, the Chinese bureaucracies are gonna receive their own mastery regarding the Celestial Authority. There's also a bit of a nerf for the military orders, and lateral nerf, especially how AIs work with each other, meaning that before the biggest military orders were getting the most of the pie. Right now it's gonna be split more evenly. Some small UI improvements right now in the army screen. When you click on an enemy army, you'll be able to see not only an exact amount of the regiments each of the unit types have, between the levies, standing armies and mercenaries. There'll be also a bar representing that split. There's a new tab in the advances, and I think this is a great addition because many people that especially did not play U5, I didn't play it much, they don't understand that there are national ideas in game and they are represented by the advances unlocked in each age, and right now they will be just in a separate tab and giving you all of the advances for your tag that you're about to get unlocked in the future ages, so you know, okay, these are my national ideas. There are multiple changes to the great powers system. First of all, they're adding regional great powers that are giving a bit smaller type of the bonuses and having a lower threshold to become a regional great power. And about the thresholds, they are completely overhauling the calculation to become one, because just like in EU4 you need a development to become a great power, right now it's getting a bit more similar instead of the weird calculation that we had before, because here the calculation will be based on the land areas. So, you know, the bigger chunks of the lands that you're controlling, where each of the areas is gonna give you from 1 to 10 great power score, dependent on its tax base. To become a regional great power, you need 15 score, while to become a great power, you need at least 30 points. And you see, that's how the calculation looks like for Naples compared to Yuan, and that's what kind of bonuses the grid power is giving. And about the bonuses, they are nerfing it a little bit, so you are no longer receiving the bonus to the diplomatic capacity that many people reported to be too strong. Also, to get any score from an area, you need to dominate 2/3 of it. And there will be new map mode representing you to understand who is dominating which area. There is Zlewikk to the trust, where before you had to pay Diplo reputation, which didn't make any sense, so that wasn't ever used, that feature to profess trust. Right now, instead, you just pay prestige to get that. There will be a new graph added to your economic tab called the economical base, which will be calculated just like you see here, population, wealth, subjects and institutions. And how fast you're growing is gonna directly impact how your neighbors are seeing you. Because if you grow too fast, also economically, you're gonna start becoming a threat to them. And there will be two types of the growth taking that the calculation will take a look at. So the 5 years growth, so the short term, and the long term growth of 50 years. So a country that doubles its economic base in 5 years is losing roughly 10 trust with every other country. And remember, the trust equilibrium is 50, so that's not that huge of an impact. They also adjusting how alliances blocks impact, how much they take off your diplomatic capacity, where like big alliance conglomerations will be more impacting, more painful for you to upkeep, and this I think mostly for the AIs to not hardbox too much like they did. They're changing an annexation cost calculation. You know, there's a size bonus on how fast you annex your subject. Right now it will be linear to the pop ratio. So, you know, before you hit a threshold, here you go, 100% faster annexation. Now instead that bonus will be growing steadily, which is I think a good change that is accompanying the nerf to the subjects in the previous patch to unnerf it a little bit. Diplomatic automations are gonna work a bit more like macro leader automations that had in EU4. So the only pretty much the only automations he had in that game. It's weird that it wasn't at the release of EU5. It should have been there. So, you know, you'll be able to decide a specific amount of diplomats and specific amount of the diplomatic capacity used on selected things like improving relations, sending gifts, carrying favors, managing subjects, etc. There's naval combat rebalance, where first of all the battles are supposed to be more decisive versus how they are right now, where they're, you know, dragging out. So not 100% sure if it's a good decision, you know, where like depending how decisive these battles will be. Like if you just kill 50%, like 80% of the navy in a single battle, that might be a bit too much and making the navy, you know, not worth maintaining. The more important decision is that in one of the previous patches they made galleys fight better in the inland seas. Now on top of that, heavy ships who received negative modifiers in the inland seas as well as in the narrows. On the other hand, for the land, they're making the land battles a bit more complex, meaning that there will be unit-specific modifiers on how efficiently they're fighting the different land types. And for now, it's just simplified to the 3 types of them. On the coast, in the inland, and on the river, where coast and inland are mutually exclusive, and river can be always on top of one of these two. So, like, for example, Varangians will be much better on the coast and river, while the heavy cav will not be doing as good over there. They also did cap the initiative that you can get on the unit, so you don't wipe the enemies too fast. There's a big rebalance to the rebellions, and I feel like with each patch we are crawling, not walking, not running, we are crawling into the good direction. Like, you know, before they introduced rebels that are not necessarily taking lands. In the last patch or 2 patches ago they introduced that you can provoke the rebels. Right now they are adding that the rebels will not necessarily take all of the forts at the full garrison. Instead, the level of garrison will depend on the rebel types, where you see slave revolts will only take 10%, cultural religious revolts 20%, pretender and state 30%, and then each of the forts will be having a role if it's going to be taken over during the revolt or not. There are many things that will be impacting that, including state satisfaction and other things on the specific location. More importantly, and I like that change the most, is that they're adding 2 new interactions with your rebels, where you can buy them off. So to be exact, you can pay them 100 ducats to fuck off, or you can accept their demands, which, as you see, can be accepting a specific culture, going towards specific societal value, maybe granting an independence to the country, I assume so, but you see, that's how it's gonna look like. There are 2 military features that they're adding, where one is being able to lend units to your ally, and another one, I think ally, that's how they call it here, and independent operations, where you can assign an army to be fully taken over by an AI. So this one looks like it's not an objective that you had so far. We just told the unit to do specific thing. Over here, looks like the AI will just handle anything that is relevant for the area that it is standing in. So this might be useful when you have too many armies, and honestly, I don't think I'm gonna use it, because still objectives should be able to do whatever you need, unless it's, you know, this kind of the war that you don't care as much, you know, you're gonna win it and you just let the AI handle it. There's change to the estates, and that one is a weird one, I think, where let's say you have a burgher's estate, and half of your burgher's estate are from your primary culture. This half has so much more power than the other half of non-accepted cultures. So the power is diminishing if they are not of your own culture. More importantly, they're adding more stuff that you'll be able to do with your estates. They already added, you know, besides paying them money, so bribing, which was on the release, recently they added to perform a reduction to destroy some of the buildings and take money in the cost of satisfaction. On top of that, they're adding 4 new interactions where you can ask them for more levies. And you see all these actions are the cost of the satisfaction. Extraordinary taxes for the duration of the war, I assume. Or emergency loan, which seems to be in a lower percentage than the normal loans. I finally can also call an emergency parliament for the cost of legitimacy. And again, I'm not 100% sure I am a fan of this change or not, because that might be adding some unnecessary micro. But again, this is gonna be purely your decision. Why I'm saying this might be unnecessary micro, because if you know your estates have really high equilibrium, which is, for example, very often with the burghers, what stops you from taking extraordinary taxes every cooldown, let's say every 10 years? Unless this is like, because it's saying levy, doesn't mean it's only for the war, I'm not 100% sure. It's kind of, I don't know if you remember, guys, in old estates in U4 also had like every, was it 10 years, you could take 200 power points from them depending on their influence. This seems very similar to it. They're finally making being at low devotion or low Republican tradition being negatively impactful, because before you could just sit at 0 debt, save money and not care about this. Right now you will actually have to pay at least a little bit to not keep it at 0. Another thing that I'm not sure I understand and like is that they want to punish you if you expand too much, which is on top of the expansion nerves in the previous patch. This makes it even more hurting, because your average control in the country will negatively impact not only taxes, not only your crown power like it did before, but also how fast you research the technologies. I don't think I like that specific change. But yeah, on the other hand, they are adding 20 new guarantee forms that are more linked and dependent on the societal values or changing the societal values. So these are very much welcomed, and you see that they are also introducing new UI where you can keep the government reforms view as you had before, or you can unlock the full screen view like this one that's also showing you all of your societal values and how they're progressing, and you have like a better view of the guarantee forms per age. They are introducing a new mechanic in the A3 because, you know, on one hand, great, we have historical amount of the princes, 350 of them. But then if you're an emperor, this is a goddamn pain in the ass to manage all of them. So what they're introducing is a nature reform, so it's not there by default, you have to unlock it over time. That is called Imperial Circle. So this will be regions of the HRE, like you see you have Rhineland, Hesse, Lower Saxony, and they will be formed over time when you enact this reform, where each of the circles will have their leader, and instead of interacting with every single of the princes over there, you'd rather interact with the circle itself and its leader. Honestly, I played only once in the HRE, so I don't have twice. I don't have much experience there, but this seems to be a step into the right direction, unlike the research thingy. Cultural tradition now gives you instant satisfaction, while cultural influence is gonna give you diplomatic reputation. There's a lot of changes with the economy, and I'm not gonna go so much into details as it is explained here, but overall what you should understand from here is that there was a kind of bug of how the prices were, equilibrium was changing between the ages, which they're fixing, because that bug was kind of making scaling of your economy a bit too easy. Yet another nerf that you're gonna face over here. But the another thing that they are noting here is you could pretty much resolve any lacks of the goods by just processing it internally. These changes that they're introducing, they're also supposed to boost the trade a little bit. They're also nerfing the production buildings, so their overall profit is 2 to 4 times lower that you're gonna see. So this is gonna be another nerf on scaling of your economy, and based on what they're saying here, the production efficiency should be much more relevant because of it. Another nerf to the locations with low control, and to be more exact, market access, which are often very linked, but if you have a low market access, this is gonna decrease the maximum level of the buildings on your location, but you see it's not that huge of an impact. Good thing is that your armies and navies are gonna increase the demand for the goods a lot, which is gonna make the whole scaling the country based on militarization much more viable. It was already very much viable. The only thing that I'm afraid of is that they are saying that the maintenance of the ships is gonna increase a lot, and just from my overall memories that especially America or some other regions, you often lacked tin to maintain the ships. I just hope that's not gonna cause like a collapse of the naval maintenance in some regions. They're also improving how you can handle your economy. So besides the loans, what they are introducing here as well are bonds that are having their own interest that is separate to the bank interest, and these bonds will be issued by your central bank, and they will be very much linked to what's called credit worthiness. That's gonna have an equilibrium at 50, and then you'll be able to impact this from your stability, being a great power, and the level of being a great power, and this is gonna be decreased also by not repaying your loans, by bankrupting, attacking countries that are lending you money, etc. They're adding 10 new building-based countries that are the banks, like Aragonese Taula de Calvi, Badenberg Family Bank, Bank of Hamburg. They're also trying to make some of the regions more unique economically. Obviously, besides the unique goods that they're having, some regions will be receiving additional production efficiency modifiers or output modifiers to specific goods. So, for example, Flanders and Tuscany will produce fine cloth more efficiently, so it's more like for buildings, not for the RGOs. Venice for the glass, Toledo and Milan for the weapons, England for wool, Bengal and Gujarat in cotton. So this way, it might actually be worth to go and conquer these regions to take over a specific production method, but I'm still not entirely sure. You can produce glass anywhere, it's just more efficient in Venice. Few small changes to the economy, where the burgers' trade ranges increased, wool is no longer a food source, that's a huge one, remember when you play the patch 1.3, but on the other hand, they are increasing the food production and other modifiers in the advances. If you talk about buildings, there's a new automation coming in, where you'll be able to enable auto expansion of your buildings, and it could be a specific building countrywide toggle or a type of a building toggle. Cabinet automation is also getting improvements. You'll be able to automate assigning a character to the cabinet so you don't have to do it manually. Well, on the other hand, you might sometimes prefer to do it manually, for example, to get the crown characters there. There's a rebalance to the mills, so they're more economically viable, they require less people, they are cheaper to produce, and they give you some modifiers like possible burgers, so they are actually worth it to upgrade from the manufacturers, which wasn't necessarily the case before. In the previous patch, they introduced the town rights, where you'll be able to specialize the urban locations into a specific area. For example, in my Serbia campaign, I was specializing my capital in output of jewelry because of the access to the silver I had in the market, and that was the most part of the production in my capital. So they're adding 5 new town rights that you'll be able to assign, and you see some examples over here. Reformation is getting a big overhaul in how it's spreading. Before it was like imaginary buildings that were popping out of nowhere. Right now, instead, they are gonna work, especially Lutheran, is more like a disease, so it's gonna spread slowly and via trade, where burgers will spread trends much faster, while the other estate types slower. So here it's also dependent on the estate types more decisively, while the Reformation is gonna more spread based on the historical figures and from their cities outside. You still will be able to build the preacher buildings. They're just not gonna pop by themselves. This is more gonna be of your decision to build it somewhere to spread the specific religion. Obviously that's gonna cost the religious influence, not money. The opinions are mostly positive. There are some negatives, I assume, for the stuff that I already mentioned, like research progress being impacted by control of your locations. But overall, I think this is great changes that we're seeing. Some of them are like a lot, like new flavor for Italy, or some of the new mechanics, and some of them a bit less, like the research thingy. But let me know in the comments if you like these changes, what's your favorite change, what you like to see in this patch that was not touched and you hate about the patch 1.2. Make sure to check out strategymaps.co store if you want to buy one of the 160 maps that we're having, and we're gonna see you soon.